We are on page 497. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again. We study from selections of Likutei Sichos, the first one for the portion of Tisa. The discussion is about the half a shekel that I'm just going to show with you an introduction. God commanded this week, in this week's portion, for Moshe, that every Jew give a half a shekel, and by giving it, it will atone for their souls, will clear up their misdeed. However, the Torah says to us in the text, Ze itnu. Ze meaning pointing out, Ze. Ze is something present. Says Rashi, it's one of the three things that Moshe had difficulties in understanding how to do it. Menorah was one of them, the olive oil, I believe, and the half a shekel. And on all three, God says Ze, because God pointed out a fiery object, it's not the olive oil, it's the Kiddush HaChodesh. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, Rosh Chodeshim. When God told Moshe to count the months, he told them, Moshe had difficulty seeing exactly what point the moon is in facing the sun, and God showed it to him. Another one is to menorah, from one gold nugget to create a huge menorah out of gold with so many details. Moshe had difficulty. Another one is this week's portion, the half a shekel. He had difficulties on how to do it, and God showed him a fiery coin. And there are many questions. I'm sure Harry has this in mind. What's the big deal? How hard it is, right?
Half a shekel of the currency.
Half a shekel is half a shekel. You go to the bank. If Bank of America don't carry half a shekel, you go to Bank Discount or Bank Leumi. I'm sure they have the half a shekel. What's the big deal? So I'm going to start reading. Number one, and the verse, this is what all should give, a half a shekel. The Talmud Yerushalmi and the Medrash comments, the Holy One, blessed be He, took out a semblance of a coin of fire from beneath His throne of glory and showed it to Moshe, telling him, something like this is what all should give. Moshe did not know how to do it, and therefore God took one from under his throne, assuming it's like a chair, a chariot, and he took out a fiery coin and says, that's exactly what I want the Jewish people to give. Tosfot is the French commentators that could combine together many, many rabbis who lived, I believe, in the 13th and 14th century, explains that the reason God showed Moshe the coin of fire was not because Moshe found it difficult to comprehend what was meant by half a shekel, because it's a very simple object. It's not a complex menorah. It's not the astrology. It's a simple coin. No difficulty. What was the difficulty? Instead, Moshe was puzzled. How is it possible that by merely giving half a shekel, a person should attain atonement for his soul? His difficulty is, you give a half a shekel, it's a very small amount of money, and that would be lechaper al nafshotechem. It will atone for your soul. How is it possible for such a inexpensive coin, it will atone for the soul? The Medrash explains that Moshe was bewildered. How can a person possibly provide atonement for his soul? It then continues quoting, a person will give his flesh to save his flesh, and everything he owns he will give for the sake of his soul, concluding that even this is not sufficient. To resolve Moshe's question, God showed him a coin of fire and explained that the coin of the Jews would possess a unique spiritual nature. The Tosfot says Moshe had difficulty. People, to save their life, will give everything. Imagine someone's life is told he's going to end in 2 days or 3 days due to a sin they committed. God's about to take him. How much would they offer to live longer, another year, 10 years, 20 years? They would give everything. They would empty out their savings account, because anyway, in 2 days, they wouldn't have any use for it if they don't do anything. Yet, God says, lechaper al nafshotechem, meaning to atone and continue living for half a shekel. The value that you're getting is, there is no balance here. It doesn't make sense. What does God say to him? He takes out a fiery, by the way, what we study right now, this is Tosfot, this is no Kabbalah. The Tosfot says, therefore God showed him a fiery coin. What he said meant by that, he's saying to him, when they give a physical gold or silver, I'm sorry, it's silver half a shekel, it's a silver coin, it is containing fire. Fire represents spirituality. They give the essence of their soul through that coin. Now Moshe understands. I still don't understand, but Moshe question was answered. On the surface, says the Rebbe, the concept should not have been so difficult to comprehend, for it had already been established that sacrifices could serve as atonement for sins. Indeed, this concept of korbanot, of sacrifices, was communicated directly after the giving of the Torah, before the command to give a half a shekel, as it was written, upon this altar you will sacrifice your burnt offerings and your peace offerings. At that time, this is right after the Torah was given. Moshe did not question how the sacrifice could bring about atonement. Only after the command to give half a shekel did Moshe wonder how giving it would secure atonement for the Jew's soul. Says the Rebbe points out that sacrifices are there to atone for our sins. In other words, and we say that, instead of my blood and guts being spilled out, the guts and the blood of the animal is being spilled out as atonement on my behalf. This idea was already told to Moshe immediately after God gave the Torah. It says immediately about sacrifices. But Moshe had no wonder. He understood that God allows for taking over kapara. Kapara means to take over the sin for my soul or myself unto the animal. Only when he's told about half a shekel, now we wonder how is it possible. And the question remains, what changed that a half a shekel is so hard to understand if you're already being told about sacrifices? There are grounds for Moshe's question, because there is a difference between the two. Unlike the sacrifices, the half shekel served as atonement for the sin of the golden calf, a sin of idol worship. This caused Moshe to wonder, how can the giving of a half a shekel atone for so severe a sin? And I'm going to give you a summary of the next two paragraphs so we can get somewhere today. What the Rebbe points out, there is a distinction between sacrifices and the half a shekel. And the distinction is, you have, just like in your body, there are different body organs. There are some organs that life is dependent on, like the heart, like the brains. But there are some organs of the body that are very useful and very important and completely human, but missing a body organ like the leg or fingers, you can survive, you can live without. If someone does not, God forbid, shouldn't happen to anyone, but he lost an ear, lost an eye, they can still live a very long life and enjoy life fully. Sacrifices are given to atone for a particular sin: theft, missing, not eating matzah on Passover, lying, not eating non-kosher food. For that you have sacrifices. That represent a detailed, just like a small organ that the neshama, that the human can survive. Idol worshiping is a cardinal sin, just like a body organ that the entire human is depending on. And therefore, it is difficult to understand how can one atone for that. And that's why the half a shekel came for what? To atone for the golden calf. It was given right after the golden calf. If it came to atone for the golden calf, now Moshe wonders. So that's the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe says, the fact that there are sacrifices to atone for a human being does not help understand the half a shekel. Why? Those sacrifices atone for a particular one sin, and that sin may be one of the 613 commandments that requires atonement. But the golden calf is something that's cut off the relationship with God completely. It's like a body, an organ that the entire human being is depending on. To say that I can bring it alive, I can bring it back and continue a relationship with God after such a horrific offense, that's when Moshe said, how is it possible? And in addition, God allows them to do it, and it becomes mandatory every single year to give a half a shekel to atone for idol worshiping. It doesn't make sense. That's why he needed God's help. By the way, this is just the Rebbe explaining the surface before we get a little deeper. Yes.
At the time of the golden calf, all the people who first were put to death, the big, whenever it was
So to dispel all these questions, I'm going to give you a very general answer, and hopefully it will accommodate many other questions that might arise. The people who worship the golden calf, or the mixture, the people, the Erev Rav, how many of them is committed it? 3,000. They all got killed. However, the entire Jewish people contributed gold. They didn't know what for. When it says that give me gold, Aaron says, give me gold, and he's thinking that it will delay, and they ripped it off the ears and the necks of the women. It was the entire Jewish people. They participated by giving the gold. The rest of the Jewish people watched and did not protest. The only one who had nothing to do with that was the Levites. The Levite tribe totally, completely didn't give anything and did not participate. They stayed away. They feared for their life. Does that help you? We are going to bet on page 499. The above also gives us insight into the interpretation of Orach Chaim offers for the verse. I think it's very, very powerful, even though it's on a side note, but the Rebbe will interject and show how it's part of the commentary. I'm just going to, okay, let me read and then I'll explain. The Orach Chaim said the following: when you take the census of the head of the children of Israel according to their number, this is the literal translation, Ki Tisa et Bnei Israel ifkudehem, Venatnu ish kofer nafsho. That's the beginning of this portion. Orach Chaim explains that the verse refers to the righteous, the heads of the children of Israel. The phrase Ki Tisa translates as when you take the census, literally means when you lift up, the heads of the children of Israel may be lifted up. That is, they may pass away before their appointed time because of Pikudeihem, literally meaning their number, but in an extended sense, meaning their lack, as lack meaning missing or misbehaving. As in the verse, Lo nifkad mimeno ish, not one man was lacking. Thus, the premature passing of a righteous leaders of the Jewish people can result from Pikudeihem, their lack, that is, the sins of the Jewish people. Orach Chaim is a Kabbalist, and he takes a verse and he explained it in the Kabbalah interpretation. When you lift up, Ki Tisa, lift up meaning also to remove et Rosh Bnei Israel, the leaders, the heads of the Jewish people. This is the Kabbalah. You should know, in other words, when a righteous man dies, and is taken away from us earlier than we feel it should be, or earlier than it should be, it is lifkudeim. It is because of the sin of the generation. So Orach Chaim says, even though the literal text, the pshat, the simple text is talking about half a shekel, about giving to atone, but if you read it differently, the same words have a whole different meaning, which is, that's what Orach Chaim says, when a Jewish leader, a righteous man dies early than they should die, we blame the people of the generations misbehaving, and that's the cause. God will take it as an atonement to make up for the sin of the Jewish people. All the different says the Rebbe, all the different interpretations of the verse share a connection. What then is the connection between the interpretation offered by the Orach Chaim and the simple meaning of this verse? So the Rebbe says the fact that Orach Chaim puts it in these words must be connection to the simple text, and how they all fit together. According to its simple meaning, the verse is speaking about gaining atonement for the sin of the idol worship, a sin which is caused a blemish of a general nature. As such, there is a connection to the inner interpretation of the Orach Chaim. Why? For a sin of a general nature has an encompassing effect on the Jews' souls and on the comprehensive souls of that generation. The head of the children of Israel, the implication is that such sins can cause the heads of the generation to pass away before the time, and their passing can bring about atonement to the people at large. Says the Rebbe, what is the simple text? Simple text is when you lift the Jewish people, when they see, then they should give a half a shekel. What's the purpose of the giving a half a shekel? To atone for their sin. What sin is it going to atone? The golden calf. The golden calf was a general sin, as we spoke about before, a major sin, that therefore it's all encompassing, affects even people who did not participate. And that's exactly what the Orach Chaim is saying, that the righteous man is going to suffer due to the misbehaving of the simple people in the generation. And here is how the Rebbe is concluding. Yes?
So the secular rejoinder would be the innocent are punished and the guilty go free. But maybe the shortening of the life of our chachamim is not considered to be suffering.
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
say that the guilty go free. They atone. They ask for atonement. If they are not atoned, if they don't come to atone, then they are out of the picture.
Thank you.
Indeed, we see similar pattern with regards to the sin of the golden calf. It caused a spiritual descent within Moshe. Says the Rebbe, exactly what happened to the golden calf? Last week we spoke about it in details. God said to Moshe, Lech red, go down, you don't deserve to be next to me. Why? Because the people, because the people sin. What does that have to do with them? He wasn't in the camp at the time. But because it was a general sin, it affected all the Jewish people. Who feels the pain in the body? The head feels the pain. So the leaders suffer first when you have the community misbehave on a large scale. Even though he was not at all involved with the sin, at that time he was atop Mount Sinai, absorbed in the spiritual realms. Nevertheless, because of that sin, God told him, go down, interpreted by our sages to mean, God descend from your greatness. We find that the sin of the golden calf also brought about the possibility of death, for the giving of the Torah tablets of the Ten Commandments had brought about freedom, and in particular freedom from the angel of death. Worshipping the golden calf reawakened the influence of the sin of the tree of knowledge, which brought death to the world. Thus, such sins have a general nature, affect the comprehensive souls of the generation. This explains Orach Chaim insight regarding the premature passing of the righteous. Now we can understand there is an interconnection there. So the Rebbe, the Medrash tells us that when God gave the Ten Commandments and came down, he abolished the angel of death. People who are about to live forever. However, when they worshiped the golden calf, what did they do? They brought back the angel of death. Who was affected by it? Not just the worshippers, the entire Jewish people. Moshe himself as well. He had to die because of the golden calf. He was forced to go away from God. Now we understand, since this half a shekel is to atone for the golden calf, now we can understand the Orach Chaim explanation that is weaved with the same idea. That is, when you lift up the heads of the Jewish people, meaning take away the heads of Jewish people, you should know it's not because of their misbehaving, it is to atone for the Jewish people's misbehaving. How we see it? The golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go down. The Jewish people as a whole suffer death from now on just because of the golden calf. So this is before the Rebbe is going to go on. There is one question that is not answered yet. Yes?
Based on this, Moshe Rabbeinu should have died earlier.
Why?
He's responsible for the Jewish people. He went down, so his death should have been premature rather than to 120.
120 was premature.
120.
Every righteous man's pay for the generation is different. For Moshe Rabbeinu to be distant from God is considered death. And if you are not aware of, but for 38 years, God did not speak to Moshe. Do you know that? Between the book of the Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, until the book of Numbers, Bamidbar Naso. There were about 38 years that God wasn't speaking to Moshe. Why? Because Jewish people. All the stories we read in Bamidbar, by the way, Korach and Chukah, everything you read, all the stories, Balak, Ben Zippor, all the stories happened the first year and a half after they left Egypt. For another 38 years, there was no speaking to Moshe. Only before a half a year, 8 months before he dies, God says to him, no, don't even think about getting on the wrong train. You're not making it to Israel. You're staying here. So this was a great descent. This is perhaps for some people was even more than that. So, given of the inner fire, we are on page 500 on the bottom. Clarification. I hope I made myself clear until now. Clarification is still necessary regarding the coin of fire. According to the above explanation, Moshe, in other words, according to what we just understood based on Tosfot, Moshe could not fathom that a half a coin can atone for a sin as grave as the golden calf. And that's why God had to show him a fiery coin. And the fiery coin, meaning representing spirituality, when someone gives a half a coin, it's like he's giving of his soul, and therefore it atones. Says the Rebbe, clarification is still necessary regarding the coin of fire. According to the above explanation, Moshe did not have difficulty conceiving of a half a shekel. His difficulty consisted of understanding how the gift of the half a shekel could bring about atonement for such a serious sin. How was his question answered by God showing him a coin of fire? Says the Rebbe, what was Moshe's problem? Moshe's problem wasn't the actual coin or how to give. How to give, you give it to a coin and you say, I'm giving you because God said so. The question is, how can a coin atone for the soul? That's the question, the answer. That is problem based on what we studied. If so, by showing him a coin from fire, it does not accommodate the question. How is it possible that half a coin can atone for the soul? Was not answered by showing him a fiery coin. A resolution may be offered based on the following analogy attributed by some to the Baal Shem Tov. There is an analogy that may be applied here, and that will solve the question. A man was trained in the art of crafting gold and silver. He was an apprentice at a goldsmith to learn how to make jewelry from gold. The master to whom he was apprenticed taught him almost all the details of the craft, but neglected to mention that before shaping gold or silver, the metal must be heated over a fire to make it pliable. The master thought this point was so obvious that it needn't be thought. However, the apprentice never grasped it and thought, and though he performed every aspect of the craft, he was never able to successfully make gold or silver jewelry because the metals remained as they were at the outset. The Rebbe says, I'm attribute this example. Soon we'll apply the example. A man goes to hires a goldsmith to teach his son how to make jewelry. And he shows him all the secrets, how to play, what tools to use, how much. But he forgot to teach him to put fire under to heat up the gold or the silver to make it moldable, malleable. And because obviously, why? Because he didn't think this is something he has to teach him. This is called basic. You teach a child how to walk, you don't teach him how to breathe, because it's obvious. The child, this apprentice, went home, bought all the tools, got a gold nugget, tried to walk over the pot, over the whatever device, and it didn't work out because in the instruction manual, it didn't say ignite fire. Says the Rebbe, this is exactly the same thing. Similarly, by showing him a coin of fire, God resolved Moshe's difficulty. The mere physical act of giving a coin cannot affect the essence of the soul and generate atonement for it. However, when a Jew uses fire, that is, he gives a coin with the warmth and fire of the soul's essence, for the lamp of God is the soul of man, then a half a shekel can serve as atonement for the soul. Now we can explain now we can answer the question. What does God show? What was Moshe's question? Not how to give. How to give, it's simple. You take a coin from your coat pocket or from the bank and you give it to a coin and say, do it for God's commandment. The question is, how is it possible for that to atone for the soul? God showed them a fiery coin and said to him, when a Jew brings it from the depth of his heart, with all his fervor and joy and dedicated for God because he wants to please God and follow God's commandment, now it becomes a fiery coin. So when you do that, it will atone for your soul, because fire is not the quantity, it's the qualitative. It's the power that exists in fire. You have a small fire or a big fire, it doesn't make a difference. One fire can ignite unlimited number of flames. The quality of a fire in one little candle is the same as a huge bonfire. Why? Because once you connect with fire, you got the fire. So God says to them, I have a shekel, the smallest coin. You can bring it with you, essence and energy and serving God. Now you bring in your soul, you connect to God, God will atone for the golden calf. Does that answer the question? Yes? Now the Rabbi has a problem with that. The act through which a mitzvah is performed reflects the intent of the mitzvah and its inner meaning. Accordingly, it must be said that the very act of giving a half a shekel reflects the spiritual intent of the mitzvah, indicating how it involves spiritual service that gives expression to the fire of the soul's essence. This, however, is not clearly understood. I'll explain the Rebbe's question in a moment. True, God showed Moshe a coin of fire, but the half shekel which every Jew gave was a simple coin that did not reflect any connection with fire. Now we understand, says the Rebbe, how half a shekel atoned for the soul. But that was Moshe's coin, not my coin. Who says that everybody brings it with fervor? There is no details in the mitzvah that requires you to bring it with fervor and joy. In fact, as we studied last week, those who refuse to give, what do we do to them? We force it to them. We force it from them because God said so. Now, if you tell me to atone for a golden calf, half a shekel represents your neshama, your soul, your fire, how come it has to be in with the way we perform? And yet with the way we perform the mitzvah is not that way. Only Moshe might have. So the Rebbe is going to give us it is not sufficient to attempt to resolve this difficulty by explaining. Okay, I'm going to give you a summary of what we study so we can move on. The Rebbe says that there is a mitzvah that is a general called mitzvah simple. Without any time the Torah talks about a mitzvah without specifying a mitzvah of Shabbat, the mitzvah of kosher, the mitzvah of Passover, it refers to tzedakah. It's in the Torah, the word mitzvah referring to tzedakah, unless specifically after the word mitzvah, something else appears. And the reason is because with the money, when someone gives tzedakah, he could have purchased his own life. He could have bought himself food. He could have taken a cruise. He could have bring family closer to celebrate. In other words, it's the ability for me to enjoy, and I'm giving it away to someone else. I deprive myself of the pleasure I could have derived from that money. Therefore, it's considered as if the entire body has fulfilled the mitzvah. When it comes to tefillin, you put on lighting Shabbat candles with the hand, prayer with your mouth. Every mitzvah belongs to one part of the body. Tzedakah is a general mitzvah because it deprives the entire body of the pleasure could have been derived from that money. And therefore, maybe it atones for the soul, because tzedakah talks about the soul. It talks about the entire person. So the Rebbe, it's impossible, because if it's so, why half a shekel? You do it every time you do tzedakah. It doesn't belong to particular this mitzvah. The second answer, you may say, is that if you are not aware, we studied it last week. What did they do with the half a shekel? Anybody knows?
They melted it into the.
They melted it and they make the adanim, the sockets by which the wall stood. We call it the foundation of the temple. How is it interpreted in the human being, in the service of God? The sockets, the foundation of the temple is Kabbalat all, accepting God's yoke. It's an introduction to serving God. If someone serves God but despises it or does it the way he likes to do it, there is no service of God. But if you have Kabbalat all, you say, God said, this is kosher, this is not. God says, pray in the morning, not in the afternoon. God says, give 10%, not 7%. Now we do it the way God wants. It's called Kabbalat all. So the half a shekel served as the introduction to the entire service of the temple. Now we can understand why half a shekel is so valuable. There is tzedakah. Tzedakah is very important. But this type of tzedakah they gave was the introduction for all the service of God. Says the Rebbe, that cannot be the reason. And the why? Because the mitzvah was not for what they did out of the coin. It says, Benatnu. The mitzvah will atone, not as a result of what came out of the silver, but the fact that they gave. Just the giving is serving as an atonement, regardless of what the outcome was. I hope I made myself clear. Now the Rebbe is asking, what's the reason that half a shekel, giving of half a shekel, will atone for the soul? And that's unique to the half a shekel. Says the Rebbe. We are continuing number Hey, page 503. I'm sorry, in English. To explain the significance of a half a shekel, sorry. To explain the significance of a half a shekel, the command to give that particular sum states, this is what everyone should give, a half a shekel. A shekel is 20 gerah. Half a shekel must be given as an offering to God. So how many gerah is like pennies? How many gerahs in a shekel? 20. Half a shekel is how many gerah? 10. So why is it called half a shekel? There was no coin called half a shekel, by the way. They had to give 10 gerah. Why 10 gerah? Why call it half a shekel? Say to them, give 10 gerah. The Torah verse states that we should give a half a shekel, and then, so that we know the amount to be given, the Torah informs us that a whole shekel is 20 gerah, leading to the understanding that by donating, that the donation to be given to God by every individual is half that sum, 10 gerah. So God makes it clear, 20 gerah shekel, half a shekel is 10 gerah.
The coin that Moshe saw.
An obvious question arises, very good. An obvious question arises. Why is all this elaboration necessary? Why didn't the Torah merely say concisely, give 10 gerah? Even if for some reason it was necessary for the Torah to mention that the gift was worth half a shekel, it would have been enough to say that one should give a half a shekel, which is 10 gerah. Instead, the Torah goes on. Why was it necessary to mention that a whole shekel is worth 20 gerah and a half a shekel is 10 gerah? If you read the text, it says, 20 gerah shekel, machatzit shekel truma LaHashem. That a shekel is 20 gerah, give a half a shekel, which is 10 gerah. Say, give 10 gerah, which is half a shekel.
The
What?
coin that Moshe saw with the fire was
I
supposed
don't-
to be a half shekel.
Right,
coin,
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they did have a half a shekel, but to my memory, I may be wrong. But to my understanding, there was no such a coin.
So gerah was also silver coin?
Gerah.
But was it
Gerah, I think it's copper. 10 pieces of copper.
But the shekel is silver.
Shekel is silver, half a shekel is silver. Gerah, 20 gerah, shekel, I believe it's 20 coins of copper.
You say half a shekel of silver. There was no half a shekel coin.
I may be wrong.
No.
What was the socket made out of?
Silver.
So.
No, but no. It's clearly that, by the way, they would charge you extra. I'm not gonna get into those details because we're gonna, but they had someone to give you change. So you give them a shekel, it would give you 10 gerah back. By the way, they would take, as I said, they would take a little fee, 1 extra gerah. So if you want to give the,
What's going on here?
No, there is no interest. It's called service fee.
They were right up to date.
Look at the, who did this half a shekel was commanded so that everyone can give, even the dalim, even the poor people.
Right. The Rebbe is going to talk about it, that it's required, mandatory to all.
Right. Not more, not less.
Right. We're going to talk about it in a moment, but I just want you to know, I have yet to see a picture, and or real half a shekel from the Talmudic time or ancient time. There are shekels. There are plenty of shekels. We had here locally. Arthur Fox has one. They sell them. They're real authentic shekels. There is no half a shekel. You won't find biblical half shekel. Don't. I believe that there wasn't. I might be wrong. This indicates. So the question the Rebbe is asking: why the details? Telling him how much is gerah is in a shekel and half a shekel, which is half of it, 10 gerah. It's a simple math. You don't need to go to Harvard. This indicates that both factors, the half and the whole, are important. The fact that the Torah tells us how much is a whole and how much is a half is because both of them are necessary to understand the mitzvah. A person must give half of a whole shekel. When a person gives 10 gerah, he must realize that he is not giving a self-contained entity, a complete 10, which is a complete number. He's giving only a half of a sum, half of a whole shekel worth 20 gerah. This concept requires clarification. In general, the Torah requires that our gifts to God be of the best that we possess. As implied by the verse, all the choice parts should be given to God. In other words, you got to do the best when you serve God. Why then does the mitzvah require giving only half a shekel, half of a whole? Do you understand the question? How come nobody asked the question? When you serve God, you want to give of the perfect. You know, we have an example of Cain and Abel. Both sacrifices. One whose gift was accepted, Abel, he gave from his sheep, for his animals, and Cain bought from flax seeds. He bought from the plants, from the tree. But God did not accept. Why? Because he bought the inferior quality. Abel bought the choicest. He picked the nicest one to serve God. The other one says, I want to give a gift to God to thank him. Let me find the ones that I have no use anyway. And that's why God didn't accept that. We see every time, it's a mitzvah. You have to serve God with the best and the choicest. Now, giving a half, how do you serve God with a half? Make it a complete shekel. By the way, the difference between a half a shekel and a complete shekel is not much more. It's not that much. It's not asking you to give $180. Imagine God says everybody should give chai dollars. Today, chai dollars is has no value. But maybe 30 years ago, I had something. Chai dollars to tzedakah, and God says no. One coin is chai dollar. You give $9, half of the chai, half of the coin. It doesn't make sense. Giving a complete shekel would seem particularly appropriate in light of the previous statements that the half shekel served as atonement for the sin of the golden calf. That sin involved the denial of God's oneness and brought about separation from God. It was thus all-encompassing. Accordingly, it would be appropriate that the atonement follows the pattern of measure for measure and involve giving everything to God, leaving nothing for oneself. In other words, the Rabbi says even farther. What's this golden calf scene that it came to atone? Someone who lost his entire correlations with God. It disconnected the cord of relationship with God completely. To atone, you got to give a complete coin because you want to atone for the entire soul, not a part of the soul. So how come it's a half? However, the Torah does not require this. On the contrary, it commands the rich should not give more, and the poor should not give less. One may not give a whole shekel, only half a shekel. Only then he can achieve atonement for his soul. There is mandatory half. What if I want to give a whole because I want to atone for my entire soul? Impossible. You have to give a half. The difficulty is further compounded by the fact that the Torah mentions the weight of a half a shekel concerning another subject. But there refers to a whole entire entity Eliezer gave to Rivka, a golden nose ring weighing a beka, a term which Rashi identifies with half a shekel. However, there the Torah does not say that he gave her half of the complete entity, a shekel instead. It uses the term beka, which describes a complete entity. Why then, when speaking about the donation given for the sockets and the sacrifices, does the Torah refers to a half a shekel, that is, half of a whole entity, a shekel? The Rebbe is asking another question. The Rebbe says, you know, you can find a half a shekel given before in the Torah, and over there the Torah used a complete term for that giving. When Eliezer was sent by Abraham to find a wife to Yitzchak, it says when he made a sign with God to know which girl is righteous, Rivka came out, and before he finished speaking, she already showed up, and he asked her, can I have water? That was a sign. And she says, not only for you, also for you camels, I will draw water and help you. He says, oh, Va'ish mishta'ela. He was shaken. He saw God is answering him right away. As soon as he asked her, Bat mi'at, who is your father? And she told him that she is related, she's a cousin of Yitzchak. He take out all the jewelry and all the treasure he has. One of the items he gave her is a jewelry that you put on the nose. Those days they used to. And it's Beka Mishkalam. Beka. The name is Beka, the weight of a Beka. What is Beka? Says Rashi, half a shekel. So there was a name for that coin called Beka. Beka was 10 gerah. So again, you have a shekel, 20 gerah. You have a half a shekel, which is half of the coin, but it's called 10 gerah, or it's called also Beka. How come the Torah is not using the word Beka? Let everybody give a Beka. Call it a complete coin by the name. Why call it by half? We're running out of time, so I'm going to give you the answer based on my previous years. I didn't get to the end. The Rebbe wants to tell us that the half a shekel is to remind us that we, our complete life and soul, is only half. What is the other half? God. And therefore, when someone humbles themselves, realizing that they cannot do anything without connecting to God and disobeying God, separates ourselves and make us half a broken vessel that has no value, that's when they achieve atonement. That's when they connect. That's why the connection or the atonement is venatnu. Not the outcome, what they did with it is foundation for the temple. That's important. That's very, very valuable. But that's not what God atonement. Atonement was achieved when you realize that what you're giving and you force, even if you're a rich man or a poor man, it doesn't matter. You have to give a half. And we call it half a shekel to remind you that if you want to be complete, you need to be connected with God. Now we can understand. I believe the Rebbe is going to say that the fiery coin you showed him a complete coin, because once you connect to God, it's like a fire that becomes one. You can become godly. The coin, the fiery coin, you could have showed him a real coin. You showed him a fire, and and you asked me what kind of a coin he showed him. He showed him a complete shekel. Why? A complete shekel. Why? Because when you give you half for the purpose of connecting to God, making a fire connect to a fire, it's a complete shekel. Now we can understand why he had difficulty. He didn't understand how to achieve atonement. Now we understand why the atonement is achieved through the venatnu, the giving, not the outcome, what they use it for. Now we understand why it has to be only half, no more. Now we understand why it's called a half a shekel and not beka, or not the Torah tells us eser gera, because the Torah wants us to know it's half. That's when it becomes a fire, it converts into a fire, and fire with God's fire is united into one entity. And that would be the end of our discussion today. God willing, we'll meet again next week.
Rabbi.